Hey everybody, welcome to GMG Review. Today we're taking a look at Warhammer the Old World Ravening Hordes. And this is part one of the review of this book, because as promised, I'm going to break this down army by army. Now, Ravening Hordes, of course, a cool throwback reference to the old Warhammer armies compilations, where you would get multiple armies described in a single book. And as this is being done by the crew that made this guy right here, Armies of Middle-earth, is a good analog for the type of book that this is going to be. Today we are breaking down the first of the armies in this book. There will be 4 more of them. You can go up in the cards and check them all out and get to the description of the army that you like. I'm going to give some overviews of the way that the special rules from the core, this thing's so heavy, the core rulebook mix and match into the army. And of course we're going to start in order with what's in the book with orcs and goblins. Now, as they've described sort of through the Warhammer Community Design blog on this, when you look through this book, you're going to find each of the armies, and this is the Evil Tome, so the 4 armies represented here, of course, are Orcs and Goblins, the Warriors of Chaos, the Beastmen, Bright Herds, and the Tomb Kings of Khemri. Doesn't mean that other armies don't exist. There will be legacy army books that you can download for free, but these are the 9 armies that are getting explored in this like Horus Heresy edition of the Old World, so don't expect to see updated stuff or new models for any of the armies that are bad guys that are not in this, which means no Skaven, no Vampire Counts, no Ogre Kingdoms. Generally speaking, this will be the focus point for the releases, the new models, and all that other stuff. So yeah, of course, we get some OGs, orcs and goblins, very important. And I'm going to start the breakdown there. So let's dive in. Of course, this book has a slight, sort of like, well, not slight, but small background description for each of the armies. And the orcs and goblins are, as you would imagine, a classic sort of Warhammer fantasy trope, so I'm glad they're in here. I imagine most of these bad guy armies are going to get paired up with a good guy army for a future release. I could see the dwarves and the orcs and goblins getting paired up, or the dwarves and the goblins and the empire and the orcs maybe, because they do need to have 5 and 5. Yeah, all kinds of things could get done in the future. So yeah, the dwarves and the empire both kind of make sense pairing up with these. So what's the unit requirements in here, and what are the units available? What I want to focus on for each of these reviews, and you're going to hear me repeat myself over and over again, is base sizes. If you already have some of these models, you can start converting them right away. I got new bases for my collection of Orc and Goblin and Empire stuff that I'll be working on the next few months, and my Chaos stuff from White Dragon Miniatures, and they have them in Hips Plastic, which I was very excited about. So, so shout out to them. Hopefully they arrive soon so I can start working on my new armies. So let's check out the Grand Army composition list. So, and no required units, of course, for Orcs and Goblins, and they have access to pretty much everything you would imagine they would have access to from the point of view of what was available at the end of 8th edition. And then with the focus being more Middle Hammer-y, away from kind of like the crazy innovations, it's stuff you would expect. So you got Black Orc War Bosses, Orc Weird Knobs, which is an Orc Shaman Lord, basically. Black Orc Big Bosses, Orc Weird Boys, Goblin Bosses, Goblin Shamans, Night Goblin Bosses, and Night Goblin Shamans. You can make a BSB out of any of the boss level characters. And then your core. So you have to have Orc Mobs, Goblin Mobs, Snotling Mobs, Goblin Spider Riders, Goblin Wolf Riders. You can have up to 1 unit of Night Goblin Mobs or Night Goblin Chiefs or Night Goblin Shamans. So you have to have 1-to-1. So it's just be like a leader to carry them. And then 0-to-1 Night Goblin Squig Herd per Night Goblin Chief or Night Goblin Shaman taken. And if your general's a Black Orc boss, 0-to-1 Black Orc Mob can be taken as a core choice instead of a special. And then special, it's Black Orcs, Trolls, Boar Boys, Boar Chariots, Goblin Wolf Riders, Goblin Wolf Chariots, not Riders, and Snotling Pump Wagons. 0-to-1 Goblin Squig Hopper Mob per Night Goblin Chief or Night Goblin Shaman. And 0-to-2 Goblin Bolt Throwers. Notice the name change, finally, updating that name change, that problematic name for Night Goblin War Machines that has been around since the beginning. And then rare, we got Arachnarok Spiders and Giants. So the Arachnarok being kind of the new-ish thing, if we're moving away from Middle Hammer, that's available here, along with Mango Squigs, which can be taken as Night Goblin Chiefs and Shamans. And then a Rock Laba and a Rock Lobster and a Doom Diver Catapult per 1,000 points. And then you can have 20% of your army on Mercenaries. And allies for the Orcs and Goblins are any Orc and Goblin Tribe Army of Infamy. So we don't have access to that yet. When we get to Tomb Kings, you'll see what an Army of Infamy is when we go through their Arcane Journal on top of going through the army list. But those are basically just like remixes of these armies with additional new units and new characters and stuff. And one of the following Grand Army composition lists, Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen, Bright Herds, and Tomb Kings of Khemri. So you can be uneasy allies with Warriors of Chaos and Bright Herds, which means they're levies. They're always going to, be on their own basically, and they can't use the BSB and the general's leadership. And then 2 Kings of Cambria are suspicious, which means they're basically the same, but also if you fall back through them, they might damage you because they start attacking. So I'm not going to go profile by profile through these armies. That would be insane. We're just going to go and give sort of the greatest hits of everything. If you could do it in 6th, 7th, and 8th edition fantasy, you can usually equip things that way. It's like a Black Orc boss. He starts with a hand open in full plate, which is pretty cool. He's got 4+ armor save instead of heavy armor. And he's on a 30 by 30. He's about as tough as you can be in this edition of the game, which means strength toughness 5. He's got 3 wounds base, initiative 6, 4 attacks, leadership 9, 135 points. He is a decent fighting lord, weapon skill 7 fighting lord. Can have all the great stuff, so hand weapons, additional hand weapons, great weapons, cavalry spears if he's on a mount, a shield, can be mounted on a variety of different things, like a wyvern or a boar. And then you can have up to 100 points of magic items, and a big boss can have 50 points of magic items. So pretty standard fantasy fare here. Regular orc bosses, same thing, just lower weapon skill than a Black Orc war boss with lower ballistic skill. Also on 30 by 30s. Shamans are on 30 by 30s. Tough 5, but like low fighting stats. There's not a lot to say here because not a lot's changed, and this, of course, is going to be a focus for more experienced Warhammer players. You can buy Frenzied for your Orc Shaman, which is interesting, so that's worth noting because you can make him into a Savage Orc Shaman. It costs an additional 0 points and 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, and that means you can have a 5-point War Paint upgrade, which means he's basically a Savage Orc. Everything can be upgraded to level 4, and then the usual spread, so 50 points for a boss and 100 points for the budget for like the high-level Shamans, the weird knobs. And they have mob rule. If this character is joined a unit of orcs with a unit strength of 10 or more, they may apply a +1 modifier to any cast rolls they make. Should they leave the unit for any reason, or that unit's unit strength go below 10, then the modifier is lost. Basically, it's the powering up for Orc Shamans. Now, one of the things you may have noticed on the Black Orcs and in here, and the Goblin bosses, and I was going to get to this at the end of the character section, because you have Goblin Shamans and Night Goblin bosses, they're goblins. They're 3 wound, maxed out toughness 4 goblins. They're all on 25 by 25. So all the orcs are on 30 by 30 or 30 by 60 for their cavalry. The goblins are on 25 by 25 or 25 by 50 if it's goblin cavalry, so like spider riders and wolf riders. You can put your bosses on things like giant cape squigs and stuff as well, which is pretty cool. And you can have a odd knob. You don't get the power-ups for the goblin shamans. So the orcs generate more Wa energy than the goblins do, which means you can't juice up your spells if you're a goblin. So you might have noticed one of the things that wasn't in here. Oh, sorry, and then all of your character mounts. You can have warboars, boar chariots, and wyverns for the orc and black orc war bosses. Warboars and wyverns for the weird knob and weird knob shaman. And then the war boss and big boss for the goblins can be on a giant wolf, a giant spider, wolf chariot, and then same for the goblin odd knob or odd get one. And a night goblin war boss or big boss can go on a giant cave squig, but no mangler squig, which is interesting. No mangler mounts. So yeah, the thing you probably didn't notice, or you may have noticed if you're a veteran player of Warhammer, is there was no quell animosity or animosity special roll on any of these characters. That's because there's just no animosity. This is maybe going to be the most controversial thing with Orc and Goblin players, is that your units will not squabble. They just took it away. Animosity's gone. Probably, honestly, in my opinion, probably for the better. But it was one of the most characterful things about Warhammer Orc armies, is sometimes they would get into fighting with each other as opposed to fighting together. It's just not in here. It's gone. They do, for the most of them, have the Warband special rule, which means that you'll be able to add your rank bonus to your leadership, which is kind of cool and a very Orc and Goblin thing still. And they do have Impetuous on some models, and the Black Orc mobs have Quell Impetuosity, which is a rule where they can take the Impetuous rules away. Impetuous just means that on a 4+, you're going to operate normally, on a 1 to 3, you have to charge. So it's not frenzy, but it's not frenzy. It's like a version of animosity that might make it you have to charge. And Goblin mobs, for instance, have Impetuous. Orc mobs have Impetuous. It's the new version sort of animosity. It's not really animosity though. It just means that your characters, or your units that are fighting you, so you probably want to have in combat anyway, are going to want to move into combat and try and charge. Even if you don't want them to. So you can bait charges with them. But it's not animosity where they would just stand around doing nothing. Or you'd roll on a table and most of the time they stand around doing nothing. Sometimes they would charge. So Nasty Skulkers have Impetuous, Night Goblin mobs have Impetuous. Sorry, Night Goblins don't have Impetuous. They have Close Order, Fear of Elves, Hatred Dwarves, Horde, and Warband, which is funny. But your Orc mobs, your Goblin mobs, and your Giant Spider mobs, I believe. No, they don't have Impetuous. So it's just Orc mobs, Goblin mobs. Nasty Skulkers do have it, which is your regular infantry on, they're like, whatchamacallit, a unit of like Heidi goblins with Armorbane 2. And your Snotling mobs do also have Impetuous. Interesting. Yeah, they have it too. Night Goblins don't, because they are a little more organized. Fanatics don't, because they are released from units and operate almost identically the way they used to. Squig Herds do have Impetuous. Troll mobs do not, because they are stupid, as usual. Orc Boar Boy mobs, of course, do have Impetuous. And then, of course, things like Swift Stride and Tuskar Charge, they get impacted on the charge. Impetuous, or Swift Stride, meaning they have +3 to their charge ranges, in addition to the d6 you roll. So it's like almost like rolling an extra half a d6. And you can upgrade them to also be Savage Orcs. Goblin Spider Riders are on 25 by 50s. Like I said, all the Goblin mounts are like that. They are Impetuous, as are the Wolf Boys. Wolf Boys also have the Skirmishers and Open Order ability. Open Order is the new fast cavalry. It means you get to make a turn, change facing, and you ignore the difficult terrain penalties for movement. Basically, treat difficult terrain almost as open. And then Skirmishers, you can be an inch apart, which is an interesting new thing for Goblin Wolf Riders, because they didn't used to be able to skirmish. And you choose which order you would like them to be in. Close Order is, of course, the standard fighting. Open Order is more like a loose formation, and then Skirmishers is Skirmishers. It's almost like they reclassed the old fast cavalry rule and like a standard rank rule, and they made something in between for fast cavalry being the Open Order thing. So it's like old regular fantasy units are Close Order, Open Order is fast cavalry, Skirmishers are still Skirmisher. They just create kind of like a new turn. Again, just cleaning up the rules. Squig Opera mobs are all Skirmishers still. They are not Impetuous, though, which is interesting, because they're immune to psychology. But Orc Boar Chariots are. And then the chariot sizes have changed slightly. The old Wolf Chariots are still going to be on 50 by 100, so if you had them on that, and the Wyvern as well. The Orc Boar Chariot is still on 50 by 100 as well. So it did not go to the big size, which some chariots have, which is 60 by 100 or 60. I think it's 60 by 100 still. They didn't get the bigification that the other Orc stuff did, because the Orc Boar Boys are on 30 by 60. Orc Boar Boy mobs, 30 by 60, that's right. Troll mobs are still on 40 by 40s, which is interesting. And then Ragnarok's still on 100 by 150. Mango Squigs are on 50 by 75. Giants are on minimum 50 by 50, 50 by 75 maximum. I do really like that. They put it in so that you can have the Giants be on the old metal giant base, or they can be on the newer plastic giant base. It's kind of just a nice, like, yeah, why not let them do that? And then giant attacks, the only thing that's missing now, it's Yell and Ball. They don't just win. They got rid of Yell and Ball. I'm sad about that. I did love that. But everything else is still in here. Headbutt, belly flop, mighty swing, thump with club, and jump up and down. Oh, pick up and. Sometimes you just get stuffed in a bag. Goblin Bolt Throwers are here on 50 by 50s. Doom Divers are on 50 by 75. Now, the way War Machine works now, it's pretty much the same as before. They're even the same points. They're 45 points like before. You have toughness. You can attack the War Machine accidentally, and then the crew mostly are just individuals, but they have a multi-wound profile now, so it's multiple models just as wound counters. Rock Lobas are still here, and for 10 points, you can always buy an Orc Bully to join up. And then magic items. Okay, so now this adds to the extensive magic item list in the core rulebook, and there's some classics in here, like the Battle Axe of the Last Waaagh. +2 strength, AP -2, and it gives you extra d6 magical attacks, but it's 2 hands and strike last, which means your initiative 1. If natural 6 is rolled for the extra attacks roll, the Battle Axe of the Last Waaagh loses the +6 attacks until the end of the last combat phase. So it's both good and bad for 75 points. Although, I mean, you could have 10 attacks at strength 7 for your Black Orc boss if you wanted to, if you roll 5. Porco's Big Stick is still here for 40 points. +1 strength, that's a spear. Armbane 1 magic attacks. The Choppiest Choppa. The only thing I really miss that isn't here is Bash's Big Axe of Bashan. It's my favorite name for a magic item, I think, still ever. Wallop is 1-hit wonder, the 1 strength 10 attack, drops you down to 1 attack. Strike first, though, strength 10, -3 AP. Knight and Goblin Boss is only single use once per game in the first round of the combat. they'll be able to use this weapon with its profile. At all the times, just to hand over magical attacks. So Wallop is one hit, one is only 15 points, but once per game. You're a Night Goblin boss and a big boss. I think you want 3-4 attacks. You make 3 strength 10 attacks. That's pretty cool. I think the big boss is 3 attacks. And then it's 4 attacks and then a Goblin War boss, yeah. And it's all that the Goblin bosses can have a whopping wonder. And then your Magic Army of Trollhide Trousers improves your save by +1 to a maximum of 2+, and it gets a Regeneration 5+ save. Regeneration happens after Ward and Armor saves are made, and it's canceled by flaming attacks like normal, but it does count towards combat res. So even if you save the wound with regen, it counts as a combat res wound. So if you chop off a troll's arm and it grows back, it still counts towards the end of the fight, which is kind of neat. And then the Armor of Mork is a suit of heavy armor. In addition, it is magic resistance -2, so -2 to cast a unit that has a guy in it wearing that. Magic resistance, of course, doesn't add, because there's no dispel dice anymore, it's just always a 2d6 roll. You can't stack your dice. It's just a modifier to the casting total when you target that thing. Talismans, the glowy green amulet's back. If the bearer or any unit that is targeted of an enemy spell, they can use the glowy green amulet. Instead of making a wizardly dispel attempt, roll d6 on a 2+, the spell is dispelled. However, if a 1's rolled, it explodes. The amulet's destroyed and you take a wound. Classic glowy green amulet. Then the Collar of Azorga, any enemy beast of burden that directs attacks against the wearer of the Collar of Azorga or their unit during the combat phase suffers a -1 to hit rolls. So it's basically the old, you can't attack me with monsters. Magic Standards, the Big Red Raggedy Flag for Goblins and Orcs has a +1 modifier to your weapon skill, so up to weapon skill 10. And when calculating the combat result, you get +1 to your combat result points. So basically it's a war banner combined with a +1 to hit banner, banner striking, or sort of striking. Actually, it wouldn't be sword striking because that was +1 to hit. It's like a +1 weapon skill sword. The Wa banner, 40 points. The Wa banner increases the maximum charge range by 3 inches, and when it's making a charge roll, it may apply a D3 modifier to the result. So basically, your maximum charge range is 3 total. Is added by +3, and you add +D3. And then the Banner of Butchery is 35 points. All models in this unit carry the Banner of Butchery have a +1 modifier to their strength when they charge. And the Guff's Windy Banner, you can reroll panic tests if you take shooting casualties or someone dies nearby. The Big Boss Hat's back for 50 points. During the command subphase, a character with a Big Boss Hat that's not engaged in the combat can use Inspiring Words by making a leadership test. And the unit they join gains the Unbreakable test special rule next thing. It's basically a command ability. Head Button Hat, any Head Button Hat wearer has the Impact Hits 1 special rule and AP of -2. And then Fungus Wine for 10 points, Night Goblin characters. During the command subphase of their turn, if they're not engaged in combat, they can distribute Fungus Wine by making a leadership test using their own leadership. When the test is passed until your next start of turn, subphase, you're immune to psychology because you just get all jacked up on Fungus Wine. You get the Glittering Whatnots for your arcane item. If the bearer or the unit is the target of an enemy spell, they can use the Glittering Whatnots instead of making a wizardly dispel. On a 1 to 3, nothing happens. On a 4+, it reflected back and targets the caster instead. Targets the caster may make a wizardly dispel attempt as well, though. Buzzgob's Knobbly Staff, you can roll your casting roll for 35 points once per turn, and the Idol of Mork. The bearer of the Idol of Mork increases their dispel range by 3 inches. So if it was a low level 1 to 2, it would be 18 goes to 21, and then higher level 3 to 4, 24 would go to 27. Additionally, once per turn, reroll your dispel roll. So it's basically like a inverse Knobbly Staff. And then your army special rules, Biggins. When engaged in combat, a model with a special rule has a +1 modifier to its strength characteristic and gains armor bane +1. So your orcs can be upgraded, like a 0 to 1 unit can be upgraded. They're not, like it's when they're engaged they get the strength bonus though, so it doesn't affect like spells or characteristic tests and stuff. Choppas. During a turn that you charge, with the special rule, you can reroll wound rolls of natural 1 and improve your AP by 1. So not +1 strength, but better AP and then reroll 1s to wound. Deploys, your army must include 1 Black Orc boss for every Black Orc mob, and includes and vice versa. In other words, for each Black Orc mob your army includes, it must have a war boss or big boss, and for each war boss or big boss, you can include 1 Black Orc mob. Fear Elves, if any elves of any type cause the fear rule against this creature, so goblins still think they smell funny. And Ignore Goblin Panic, basically all the orcs have this. You don't have to make panic tests for the destroyed or fleet nearby, or fleet through you. Ignore Panic, that makes sense. The unit does not have to make a panic test when any friendly units are destroyed or flee from combat within 6, or flee through. And then Quell Impetuosity, while within 6 of the unit with this special rule, friendly units ignore the Impetuous special rule. So your Black Orcs still make it so they don't have to charge a test. And then Tusker Charge, +1 strength and -1 AP if Warboar's Tusks make an impact hit. Or sorry, have a strength attack with that stat. So not impact hits, that's right. It's their bonus to their strength and AP when they attack. And then Wah, once per game during the command sub phase, you can pull a Wah by making a leadership test. If this test is passed until you start your next turn start sub phase for this character, basically until the next command or strategy phase. Their mount any orcs that they have joined may reroll hit rolls of natural 1, and when calculating combat results, get a +1. So it's not the supercharge anymore, it's like a reroll to your damage or your charging and stuff. And then Warpaint, it's a 6+ ward save against any wound suffered. However, you cannot wear armor of any kind, but you can wear a shield. All right, magical lores. The lore of Gork or Mork. Wizard with the lore of Gork special rule can discard a randomly generated spell as normal. When they do so, they can select a signature spell from one of these instead, or the lore of magic. So Wah magic is the core magic that's in the rule book, and then you've got access to these as your 2 drop downs. And I believe the lore of Gork and Mork are available too. Lore of Mork is on goblins, and then lore of Mork is on. No, lore of Gork is on shamans. Lore of Mork is on goblins. Yeah, so it's basically Big Wah, Little Wah, if that makes sense. Brain Bosta. So like Lore of Mork is goblins, and this one is the orc boys. Brain Bosta is an assailment spell, so it means it happens in the combat phase. Cast on 10, ranges in combat with you. Single enemy model the caster is engaged with suffers a strength 6 hit with multiple wounds D3, and no armor saves or regeneration allowed, but you can make ward. So it's like a death stare. And then Gaze of Gork's magic missile on a 9. It has a 5d6 inch range. Draw a straight line, 5d6 inches in length with the caster's base edge. Any model friend or foe under it takes a strength 5 hit with an AP of -3. It's your eye lasers. And then the lore of Mork. Mork's curse is a hex. Cast on an 8+, range 18. Remains in play. While this spell's in play, the target enemy unit must reroll natural armor saves of 6. It's a cool curse. Would happen in the strategy phase. And then Itchy Nuisance targets types a hex, casting value 9+, range 15. Until start of the next turn sub-phase, the target enemy unit suffers -D3 modifier to its toughness, initiative characteristic to a minimum of 1. And that's it for orcs and goblins, except for their Wah magic, which I'm going to go through as well, just for context's sake, so we can see the rest of the spells. Now remember, you don't get to, there's no magic pool anymore. You just cast all of your spells during the turn if you're eligible to, and you can dispel as many times as you want. So your signature spell, and orcs and goblins get this whole spell list, basically, and you roll as normal to pick a spell. Fist of Gork is your signature. It's an assailment, so again, you have to be in melee. Cast it on 9+. Remember, you add your wizard level to the casting roll. There's no pool of dice, no winds of magic. Place a large 5-inch blast template so that its central hole is directly over the center of the unit the caster is engaged with. Once placed, the template will scatter D3 + 1 inches, and any model friend or foe whose base lies underneath the template's final position risks being hit. So it's like a usual, it's a roll to hit. And it suffers a single strength 4 hit with an AP of -1. Because the big Fist of Gork comes down out of the sky. And then you got your 6 random spells that you could have or drop for signature, or one of these signatures. You get Vindictive Glare. It's a magic missile cast on an 8+, range 21. The target enemy unit suffers a single strength 7 hit with multiple wounds D3, and no armor saves permitted. Ward and regeneration spells can still be done. This spell may target an enemy that's engaged in combat. And then Hand of Gork and or Mork. This is a conveyance spell, so it moves things in the movement phase. Cast on 7+, has a range of 18. This spell can only target friendly characters, but may target characters engaged in combat. You can immediately move the friendly target character from the battlefield and place it anywhere within 2d6 inches of its original location, but not within 3 of the enemy. And if a double one's rolled, the character lands badly and loses a wound. And you can allow a character to leave combat that way. And it just says character, remember. So you can Hand of Gork or Mork someone on a wyvern, it looks like. It can only target friendly characters. Yep. So you can pull a monster to combat with it. Bad Moon Rising, it's a hex cast on a 10+, range is 15. Unless there's, wow, I shouldn't say you can pull a wyvern out, because there may be a conveyance that's saying that, or there may be a prohibition here in the rules saying that conveyance spells can't do that. Bad Moon Rising, until the end of the turn, the target enemy unit suffers -D3 modifier to its weapon skill initiative characteristic to a minimum of 1. The Evil Sun Shining, it's an enchantment with a casting value of 9. It's a self-range. Until the start of the next start of turn sub-phase, friendly units that are within the caster's command range may reroll any rolls to hit of natural 1 and improve the armor-piercing characteristic of their weapons by 1. So it's almost kind of like a, because in your command range, it's a pretty decent-sized bubble. It's like a mini wall almost. Anyway, here we go. Any friendly unit that's within the caster's command range during the declare charges and charge reaction subphase of this turn, increase its maximum possible range by 3, and making a charge roll, it may apply D3 extra inches to the modifier to the result. So you kind of have almost a swift stride for these guys. And then Footagork or Mork, it's a magical vortex with a casting value of 8+, range 18, remains in play, plays a 5-inch blast template, so the center hole is within 15 of the caster. While in play, the template is treated as dangerous terrain. The template moves D6 inches in a random direction. During every start of turn subphase, any unit, friend, or foe the template touches or moves over suffers D3+3 strength 5 hits with an AP of -1. So extra damagey, strength 5, and yeah, it's a big moving around ball of Gork or Mork, which is actually a foot. So that's it. Let's reflect then on the old schoolness of this army list. I'm pretty excited about it. And it's just the greatest hits of Orcs and Goblins. Now, will they eventually get I'm imagining you're probably going to get a paired up, at least for the next 4 years. You're going to get a paired up army list. And the Orcs and Goblins would make sense to be the ones split in half, where they do like a Goblin rebox with a rule book, and then either, I would say it'd be Dwarves against Goblins, so you'll see the Dwarves and the Goblins come out as 2 boxes is my TSN turning point prediction, or my whatever TSN prediction of this happening. Sportsbook prediction. There we go. And the Orcs and Goblins and probably the Empire get paired up at some point. And Hiles and Chaos and Wood Elves and Beastmen. So if I was to go down if you want to wait for this, if you don't have the models already, then you're probably going to see that in the next couple of years. You've got at least 4 more years of releases for the old world every year, doing a pair of army boxes at some point during the year. So who knows what order they're going to come out in, but I would bet that those will be the pairings, and that means you're going to get the Orcs and then the Goblins, probably not all at the same time. You get probably the 2 of them split in half as the 2 separate armies, because they are probably the biggest of the armies that are in here. So yeah, thanks for joining me for this first review. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it kept the flavor of the old one. Impetuous instead of Animosity is an interesting choice. We'll see how that plays out overall. But the feeling of the Orcs and Goblins are still there, and you have pretty much the same build options as you had before. So whether or not you're just making new movement trays for your old Orc and Goblin army, or you're going to make a new army from what you can cobble together today, good luck, green skin commanders of the future, and we'll see you for the next army review. You can go up here in the cards, pick the army you want to look at, and find out the info. Big thanks for watching. Thanks, not MASH. Happy Raming.